The following video contains many spoilers for the game Inscryption. This game is best played with as little knowledge as possible going in, so please, if you have any intention of playing Inscryption, leave now. Inscryption is my favourite game of 2021, blending multiple game types across an interweaving story that involves escape room puzzles, roguelike gameplay, and cards. In this video, I'm going to explain the lore rather simply, without going into how the player learns about the lore. But it is important to note that much of the game's lore is not obtained through regular gameplay, but rather through logs left by Casey, available only through the Casey's mod expansion, or through the ARG, where you decode hidden logs within the game using ciphers that are obtained through gameplay, digging through other IP from Daniel Mullins, and a real-life treasure hunt. It's all very clever, but also very convoluted. So, for this video, I will mark out the parts of the lore not found through regular gameplay with the following symbols. And with that said, let's dive in. On the 30th of April 1945, the Soviets found Adolf Hitler's body. As they rummaged through his belongings, they uncovered a hidden deck of cards from his pocket, belonging to the old German card game called Karnoffel. Within this deck of cards was a code, which will be referred to as the Karnoffel Code, said to be created by the devil, although the devil card does bear striking similarities with Hitler. The Soviets used the information in this code to create a computer algorithm containing the Karnoffel Code. While the game never explicitly outlines what the Karnoffel Code is, encrypted messages found in the game allude to it giving its bearer great power and leading to a terrible fate. Sometime after World War II, Barry Wilkinson, also known as Big Ear, was operating as a US spy within the USSR. He obtained a copy of the computer algorithm and cracked the encryption for the Karnoffel Code. He intended on sending it to Boston in the US by shipping the floppy disk containing the code along with many decoy empty disks. Wilkinson was successful in getting the floppy disk out of the USSR, but was arrested shortly after. From the ARG, we learned that Wilkinson eventually made it back to the US. However, the game informs us that he was later shot. An unspecified amount of time later, a gaming company within the US called GameFuna was working on a digital version of an obscure card game known as Inscryption. The digital Inscryption was designed for a specific purpose, as a cover for the Karnoffel Code. The secrets of the Karnoffel Code are hidden under old data within the game. Maxim Kaminsky, a Polish man, was working with GameFuna against Russian forces. In the ARG logs, he expresses frustration for GameFuna's decision to prioritize working on the game, when the game was only ever intended to be a cover for the old data. The Inscryption game itself was based around the following idea. In the beginning, the world was cardless and devoid of gameplay, until 4 scribes arrived, each possessing a unique ability of creating cards. Grimora, scribe of the dead, crafts her cards using her quill to inscribe epitaphs. Leshy, scribe of beasts and aspiring game master, captures his cards by photographing beasts. P03, the robot scribe of technology, creates cards by copying the CPUs of robots. And finally, Magnificus, scribe of magics, who paints his pupils into cards, but only after they endure immense suffering on his behalf. Using their cards, the scribes took control of the world. It is up to the player, known as the Challenger, to battle them and eventually replace one of them. The Challenger would have to navigate a 2D map, just as we see in Act 2, and conquer each of the scribes' domains one at a time. So this was the intended gameplay. What went wrong? To answer this, we have to look at the life of Casey Hobbs, an employee of GameFuna. One night, she was working late on the latest build for Inscryption. Unbeknownst to her, the copy of Inscryption she was using contained the old data and the secrets of the Karnoffel Code. The old data had corrupted her copy of Inscryption. The 4 scribes were aware of the old data and had sent their followers to retrieve pieces of it. The angler was the first to succeed, fishing it out of the river and beating Ghoul Casey, Goobert, and the dredger. This old data would give Leshy the power to reign over the entire game. The angler left his post to go and tell the Scribe of Beasts the good news. Casey Hobbs was observing the angler as this happened, and was utterly bewildered. The angler had no walking animation in the game, yet he was walking away from his fishing spot. When she later interacted with Leshy, she discovered he had dialogue that had not been scripted. Casey starts to believe she may have made it up, delirious from working late. So the next day, she attempts to recreate the bug on another inscription disc, but to no avail. This may be indicating that she has the only copy of the old data. When Casey inserts the game disc from the previous day, she observes that the game has changed substantially. The game is suddenly in 3D, and she finds herself within Leshy's cabin. Though Casey was unaware, Leshy had managed to seize control of the game in between sessions. Grimora, Leshy, P03, Magnificus. Long ago, the 4 scribes lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation Leshy attacked. He captured the 3 scribes in the form of cards. Grimora became a stink bug, P03 became a stoat, and Magnificus became the stunted wolf, with Leshy ruling over the world unchallenged. Also, at some point in time, Leshy excised Magnificus's eye. I don't know when that happened, I assume he lost it in a game of cards. Anyway, Casey continues to play this new version of Inscryption. She reaches out to colleagues for information, but receives no help. As she is a fairly lonely individual, she enjoys the new version of Leshy, who appears to be speaking directly to her. She finds a friend in the Scribe of Beasts. Casey continues to dive into the game, seeking answers for what she has seen. Inside, she finds references to the old data, but the only time Leshy will talk about it is when he is wearing the woodcarver's mask. She then discovers logs written by Maxim Kaminsky, where he alluded to Inscryption being merely a cover. Casey finds this revelation infuriating. All those long nights of development for a game that was never intended for mass consumption. Casey ended up uncovering a great deal about the old data. She detested it and decided to hide it from the world. She buried the floppy disk containing the digital version of Inscryption in the middle of the woods. She then recorded the coordinates of the buried disk on one of her own inscription cards before resealing it in its original pack. One night, a fire breaks out at Gamefuna's offices. It's reported that nobody died on site, but that Casey Hobbs, an employee, died of fire-related complications after staying back at the office to work late. This immediately ends Casey's investigations and keeps the secrets of Inscryption and the old data hidden for longer. Sometime later, Casey's Inscryption cards are put up for sale by her mother.
Hey there, card gamers! I'm the Lucky Carter, and this is another pack opening video.
Enter Luke Carter, a man who seemingly subscribes to the belief that your livelihood should be determined by your last name. Luke is a card game enthusiast who creates YouTube videos of card pack openings on his account, The Lucky Carter. In a journal entry, he says that his channel helped him deal with the loss of his sister a few years before, and he was pleasantly surprised by the growth of his community over time. His most recent journal entry is dated as January 2009, so we can assume that the events of the game occurred around 2009. Luke ends up purchasing Casey's cards at her mother's yard sale, and, during his subsequent card opening video, he discovers that one of the packs has been opened and resealed. Concerned that the rare card may have been taken from the pack, Luke inspects each of the cards carefully and finds that one of the cards has a set of coordinates inscribed. Luke decides to visit the coordinates and films his trek there. As he gets close to the site, his camera battery seems to cut out, despite being at full charge 5 seconds earlier. Luke shrugs off the malfunction, though these glitches will occur increasingly frequently as the game progresses, as the old data interferes with technology in the real world. After the mishap with the camera, Luke arrives at the coordinates and almost immediately unearths the buried cache. Inside, he finds the floppy disk version of Inscryption that Casey Hobbs had buried before her death. After ordering a floppy disk reader from the web, Luke Carter boots up the disk and, to his surprise, discovers a fully operational digital version of Inscryption. Luke is unaware of the broader world of Inscryption involving the 4 scribes, just as he is unaware of the hidden reason for the development of the game, namely the Kanoffel Code. Because he is playing Casey's copy of the game, Leshy is currently ruling over the game world and has removed the New Game option. Luke must continue the previous game state, which begins where Casey's journey ended. A confused Luke enters the game world inside of Leshy's cabin. He is greeted by the Scribe of Beasts himself, who, like any good game master, tries to fade into the background, obscuring his features from Luke to allow the game to shine. Leshy patiently takes Luke through the rules of the game, explaining that beasts do damage to opposing players and defend against damage dealt by the opponent's beasts. Winning requires one player to deal a net damage of 5 points to their opponent, with damage being measured on Leshy's scale. Everything in the game requires sacrifice. Playing beasts requires sacrifice in the form of squirrels or other beast cards. Beast cards can be sacrificed to impart their abilities on other beast cards, or to provide permanent boons at the start of battles. Personal sacrifices can be made in order to weight the scale to the player's advantage. Leshy's world is enriched with NPCs from the non-corrupted version of the game, as Leshy uses his experiences to take on their forms, donning masks of characters such as the woodcarver and the trader. Leshy introduces Luke to the Stoat card, which is secretly P03. P03 retains some abilities and is able to communicate directly with Luke, an ability regular beast cards lack. The Stoat claims that Leshy is insane and instructs Luke to investigate the cabin looking for other unique cards, claiming that they are needed to persevere against Leshy, though P03 does not disclose that these cards are actually the other scribes. So, here Luke finds himself playing Leshy's procedural card game, leading him through 3 lands, at the end of which are unique bosses he must face off against. The Prospector, who is capable of turning Luke's cards into defensive nuggets, though has a glaring weakness in the form of his mule. The Angler, who steals his opponent's cards with his hook and baits his opponents into unleashing powerful shark cards. The Trapper/Trader, whose cards begin as rather innocuous frogs, but transform into traps upon death. These traps ensnare cards and turn them into pelts, which can later be traded back to the boss for more powerful attack cards. If Luke succeeds against the 3 maps and their bosses, he faces off against the Scribe of Beasts himself. Though I agree with P03 on this one, Leshy has no respect for the rules, getting desperate midway through the fight and bringing the literal moon into the fray. Leshy makes it impossible for Luke to succeed at his first attempt, penalising Luke for moving too fast by bringing in insurmountable cards to quickly put an end to Luke's run. When Luke inevitably fails his run, he is dragged by Leshy into the back room of the cabin, which is flashing brightly and usually kept locked. Here, he'll photograph Luke, turning him into a death card, and forcing Luke to begin again. Later on, when Luke is captured, he can try to steal Leshy's camera and photograph the Scribe of Beasts, but his plan is quickly foiled when he realises that the camera lacks a roll of film. Leshy will wrestle the camera off Luke and turn him into a death card yet again. Through trial and error, Luke must free the other scribes and uncover the various secrets hidden within the cabin. Each time he defeats Leshy and is taken to the locked room, Magnificus can reach out and show him the hints he needs to make progress. Leshy has shown time and time again that sacrifices need to be made in order for progress to occur. Eventually, Luke will sacrifice his own eye to win a battle. He will then have the opportunity to replace his missing eye with one from Leshy's collection. Luke can select Magnificus's eye, which Leshy had excised some point in the past. The Scribe of Magic's eye is magical itself, and will reveal hidden clues around Leshy's cabin, including the way to access Magnificus's beast card, the Stunted Wolf. Once freed, the Stunted Wolf uncovers the roll of film, telling Luke to grab it as it's the final piece needed to end Leshy's reign. Now, when Luke beats Leshy at cards and is transported to the locked room, he snatches Leshy's camera, inserts the roll of film, and quickly snaps a picture of the scribe before he can wrestle the camera away. Leshy has been reduced to a death card. Luke is now free to explore the enigmatic locked room. In it, he finds the source of the blinding flashes, the new game card that Leshy had removed from the title screen. Luke grabs the card and returns it to its original title screen. With Leshy deposed, the game reverts back to its original 2D state. Now, it is time for Luke to begin a new game. As Luke plays this strange Inscryption game, he is also recording videos using his camcorder, trying to understand what is happening. Around the time he's playing Leshy's version of the game, he writes an email to Game Funa, the company who made Inscryption, asking them about the existence of the digital game. While he's waiting for a response, he begins a new game, which takes us to Act 2. After resetting the game state, Luke is finally introduced to the scribes, now in their true 2D forms, and becomes aware of his role as a challenger to the scribes. He chooses a scribe to depose, takes on their deck, and begins his adventure through the scribes' domains. Each of the scribes is aware of the old data, and has their own desires for it. Grimora wants to destroy the Inscryption game, allowing her to finally rest and preventing the corruption from spreading. P03 has more nefarious plans. It wants to take over the game and cause the Great Transcendence, which essentially boils down to P03 uploading the game to the internet, where people will naively download and play it. In most of these versions of the game, P03 will reign, furthering its power across the world. Magnificus... Look, I never understood that guy. I have no idea what his end goal is. And finally, we have Leshy. Well, we've already seen Leshy's ideal world, playing cards for eternity. Act 2 introduces several new game mechanics and strategies for deck building, while Leshy's beast and blood sacrifice mechanic, as well as Grimora's bone mechanics, were introduced in Act 1. Magnificus and P03's mechanics are new. Magnificus uses gem cards to power his magical creatures, while P03 uses the energy generated at the beginning of each turn to power its robots. Leshy's domain is within the upper east quadrant. Here we can find the familiar faces of the Angler, the Prospector, and the Trader-Trapper. Luke must capture photographs of various beasts for each of these characters before defeating them in a battle of cards. Only after defeating these three can Luke battle Leshy again. After Luke defeats Leshy, they are both confronted by P03. P03 mocks Leshy's gameplay and remarks that it's no wonder the game has returned to its original state, saying it would have happened sooner had Casey not buried the disc. It refers to Leshy as a stinking beast before taking its leave. In Leshy's domain there are two hidden areas, one to the right of the cabin, just north of the Shark's Lake. Here, a large photograph of Casey Hobbs can be found. This appears to be evidence of the old data's corruption of the Inscryption game. The next hidden area is north of the Rabbit Warren, where the woodcarver can be spoken to. She remarks that she is rarely found by players and questions her purpose. She acknowledges the existence of the old data, but refuses to elaborate on it, stating that the old data spells death and that players never seem deterred by that, probably referring to Casey's investigation into the old data. The woodcarver also laments that the scribes care not for the deadly consequences of unleashing the old data, remarking that they do not care for human life, too consumed by their own agendas. Within the southwestern portion of Leshy's domain, a small area can be found containing a raft, a builder called Rebecca, and the angler. When prompted, both Rebecca and the angler will tell you little tidbits about the game and its lore. The angler will tell Luke that Leshy is using the raft as a Plan B escape, ostensibly aware that P03 might be planning something truly awful. Moving on to Grimora's tombs. Grimora's tombs reside in the southeastern quarter of the land. At the end of the tomb is Grimora, but impeding the path to her are 3 tombstones. To progress, you must battle the 3 ghouls and search the tombs to uncover the puzzle of who they are, how they died, and what else should be written on their epitaph. Only after the 3 epitaphs have been inscribed can Luke face off against Grimora. One of the ghouls is named Casey Hobbs, after the developer who perished. This ghoul was tasked with trying to retrieve old data from the well within Grimora's tombs. When Luke finally faces off and succeeds against Grimora, she leaves him with one request, that when it is finally time to pick a scribe to depose, he will spare her. She also hints at there being things that Luke does not understand about Inscryption, alluding to her awareness of the old data and the horrors within, though she refuses to elaborate in front of Luke. Beneath Grimora's tombs sleeps an ancient entity known as the Bone Lord, who we will elaborate upon later. For now, it is time to head to the Wizard's Tower. Magnificus resides with his 3 students inside of a tower. The students are confined to chambers where they are enduring unimaginable suffering, one turned into goo, one with a head on a spike in a lava field, and one surrounded by an all-consuming darkness. Each of the students is eager to prove themselves to Magnificus so that he may bestow upon them the highest of honours, being transformed into a card for his deck. Luke must find a way to unlock each of these chambers and battle all 3 pupils before facing off against the wizard at the top of the tower. When Luke reaches the top level of the tower, he finds Magnificus, along with the openings of a letter he is penning to Grimora. Magnificus is trying to caution her that P03 may have even more nefarious plans than they had originally thought, but his letter trails off before completion, and it is time for Luke to battle him. When Luke wins the battle against Magnificus, Magnificus starts to tell him the story of how he lost his eye, before delving into the much more serious topic of P03. But, just as he is beginning to open up about it, Luke's camera shuts off, and the player's screen fades to black. When the camera turns on and starts recording the gameplay again, Magnificus is nowhere to be found, ostensibly whisked away by P03 before we could reveal its secrets. Luke will receive no further information from the Scribe of Magics. But, tucked away in a nook of his tower is a hidden room. Inside is the ID for Barry Wilkinson, the spy who smuggled out the Canoffel Code, yet another sign of the old data's interference in the game world. It is time to head to P03's factory. P03's factory lies in a northwest portion of the map. P03 is having quality assurance issues with its bots and refuses to battle Luke until he first gets a better deck and second discovers the source of the problem, or encourages the bots to turn themselves into scrap for the cause. Luke navigates the factory, completing simple logic puzzles, battling bots and encouraging them to throw themselves onto the conveyor belt. At the end of the factory, Luke reaches the Dredger, a bot who is fishing for parts for P03. The Dredger refuses to commit to the battle, being utterly devoted to its work. It concedes the battle after the first round. After giving Luke his reward, a pack of cards, the bot continues to fish for materials. It reels in a bizarre item, a piece of old data. The bot exclaims its joy at pleasing P03 with the piece, though Luke fails to understand the significance of the item. Luke returns to P03 and is finally set for battle. P03's battle takes place on a conveyor belt, with cards moving clockwise at the end of each turn. This necessitates thinking several steps ahead during the battle, anticipating which cards will be opposing each other each turn, and which cards are going to be lost or gained at the end of each turn. At the end of Phase 1, P03 replicates Luke's strongest card, filling its side with this card. Luke must persevere until these cards can move onto his side of the board, where he can use them to his advantage to overpower P03. Now, having defeated all 4 scribes, Luke is ready to challenge one to a final battle, where the scribe will be more powerful than in any of the earlier battles. However, regardless of whom he chooses to replace, P03 will interject before the battle can commence, taking control and insisting Luke battle it instead. On a second turn of the battle, P03 reveals what it used the old data for, creating a card that, when played, allows P03 to take control of the game. The game is suddenly corrupted as P03 takes the reins. Everything begins to fade away as Act 2 comes to an end. Over the course of Act 2, Luke records several more videos. First, he makes a video asking his audience whether they have ever heard of a digital inscription game. He's desperately trying to understand how such a bizarre thing came to his possession. At the end of the video, he begins to ask, "What the fuck is the Carnoffel code?" but is cut off halfway through by the old data's interference. The next day, Luke finally receives a response from Game Funa. The company denies the existence of a digital version of Inscryption, while simultaneously demanding its return under threat of litigation. Things are starting to get very strange for Luke, both in the game world and the real world. Luke enters Act 3 and awakens strapped to a desk with P03 on the opposite side, mirroring Leshy's cabin from Act 1. P03 also wants to play a game, but unlike Leshy, who was focused on an immersive roleplay experience, P03 is using the game to trick Luke into aiding it in the mysterious Great Transcendence. As such, his world building is lacking, rather erratic and improvisational. He calls his world Bottopia, and its rulers Uberbots. P03's hubris refuses to allow it to admit Leshy's a good game master. Instead, P03 insults Leshy for being a lore builder and believes that its 5-row battles are inherently superior to Leshy's 4-row battles. P03 clearly strives for quantity over quality, but credit where credit is due, it has some very innovative boss fights. Luke is tasked with conquering the 4 domains of Bottopia and best all 4 Uberbots in card games, mirroring the objectives of Act 2. Much like in Act 1, Luke must navigate both the game board and the surrounding environment, exploring the rooms where he is confined. However, in P03's world, losing a battle does not result in a complete reset, so progress is not entirely lost. And the game mechanics are slightly different, with robot-themed cards being played at the expense of energy, rather than by sacrificing squirrel cards. Luke must defeat 4 bosses to reach the Great Transcendence: the Photographer, Golly, the Archivist, and the Painter. Each of these bosses plays an important role for the Great Transcendence, though P03 will not reveal this until the very end. Let's begin with the Photographer. The Photographer is P03's version of Leshy, and it resides in the Foul Backwater. The battle involves Luke taking photographs of the current cards in play and using these photos to reset the playing field to his advantage. The Archivist is P03's rendition of Grimoire, and it resides in the Dank Crypt in the southeast corner. To fight the Archivist, the player must allow P03 to access their hard drive. The battle commences with Luke being able to weight the scales by selecting large files from the drive. Eventually, the player is asked to select an old file on the drive, which will be used as a battle card, and its stats will be derived from the age of the file. The archivist claims that if this card dies, it'll be deleted from the hard drive, though this is ultimately an empty threat. Next we have the Painter, which is P03's version of Magnificus. The Painter resides in Gaudy Gemland in the southwest portion. P03 asks Luke to finish creating this boss. Luke must choose the appearance of the boss as well as the rules of the boss battle. After defeating the Painter, all that is left is Golly. Golly is a bit hard to define. Given her location in the northwest portion of the map, and the fact that hers is the only land to have a positive name, the Resplendent Bastion, as opposed to names such as Foul Backwater, it would appear that Golly is supposed to reflect P03, maybe before they became corrupted by the old data. There is a bit of weight behind this theory because you can come across Goobert in Act 3 and he seems to indicate that Golly is buried deep within P03. But this is still quite speculative. I don't think it's been confirmed anywhere, so all we know is that Golly resides where P03 resided in Act 2. Anyway, Golly is the antithesis of P03, enthusiastic, supportive, naive, and generous. It is unsurprising that she is P03's most hated Uberbot. She has this innocent fascination with the internet that is almost childlike. The first phase of her battle requires the player to fight against their own Steam friends who have been transformed into cards. In exchange, Golly offers you a card that has been created by another real-life player to be used against her. Her second phase involves creating a card of your own to return the favour you had received in Phase 1. Phase 2 can go one of two ways. Either the card is successfully sent to another player, and Luke's success hinges on that player's success, or the card fails to send, and Luke must use it to fight against Phase 2 Golly, which is much harder than Phase 1. In the end, when Luke succeeds, Golly is happy to admit that she has found some positivity on the internet, and she cheerfully gives Luke this win. So, P03 intends for Luke to fight all of these Uberbots and then perform the Great Transcendence. However, things don't go exactly to plan. It appears that the other three scribes survived P03's takeover. It is unclear how they did so, but they may have taken Leshy's emergency boat found in Act 2. The three of them wish to usurp P03, concerned that its plans are far too nefarious to be allowed to continue. They surreptitiously destroy one of P03's cameras, prompting the bot to send Luke to investigate the cause. The scribes need to ensure that only Luke will find their hiding place, so they create the perfect system for keeping the bot away. A simple "Are you a robot?" capture. Foolproof. When Luke passes the test, he is taken deep under P03's domain, where he is greeted by the other scribes. Hey, Magnificus got his eye back! Good for him! The scribes want him to continue to play P03, distracting it from the scribes' plans. Leshy vows to strike P03 in its moment of joy, and Luke is sent back to the surface to continue the facade. Thus far, I've tried to tell the story of Inscryption in a chronological fashion. I want to deviate a little bit right now, just to focus on the story of some important characters. The Bone Lord and the Mycologists. I feel they warrant their own section in the video because of the way their story is interwoven throughout the acts and come to a conclusion only in Act 3, so I've saved them until now. Let's begin with the Bone Lord. The Bone Lord is a rather mysterious entity who resides in the lowest level of Grimora's tombs. He hoards great knowledge of the old data, perhaps due to his proximity to the old data, which is also buried deep within the game. In Act 1, the Bone Lord is depicted as a skull hanging on the wall of the cabin. His altar can also be found along the game board paths, where he demands a sacrifice in the form of a card. The boons bestowed upon Luke depend on the quality of the sacrifice. Poor quality sacrifices yield nothing, while great sacrifices bestow the boon of the Bone Lord, granting an additional 8 bones at the start of each battle. These bony boons offer a moderate advantage to fights, as they allow Luke to play many creature cards in turn 1, which would otherwise be locked away until later stages of the battle. But other than this, the Bone Lord doesn't play a significant part in Act 1. In Act 2, the Bone Lord can be found in the lower chamber of Grimora's tombs. He remains dormant and, just as in Act 1, asks a sacrifice of Luke. If Luke combines 2 broken obol cards during regular card battles, he will receive a full obol. Like the obols presented for passage on Charon's boat in Greek mythology, the obol in Inscryption can be presented to the Bone Lord to gain passage beneath the world of Inscryption, to the Bone Lord's home. Here, the menacing creature can be approached. He speaks about the corruption of the old data and commands Luke to worship him and the old data if the conversation is to continue. In return, he gives Luke a holokey, which can only be used in Act 3. He also gives Luke the Bone Lord's femur. Luke has the opportunity to meet the Bone Lord one final time, in Act 3, where he uses the holokey to access the Bone Lord's chamber. The Bone Lord imparts his wisdom upon Luke, and incidentally P03, but refuses to allow Luke to record the details. The camcorder glitches out, and the player gains no knowledge of the old data. Though, judging by Luke and P03's reactions, we can ascertain that the old data has some serious real-world consequences. Next, we have the Mycologists. The Mycologists are an odd pair, 2 like-minded yet independent heads on a single body. They are fascinated with experimenting on twin sets of cards and can be seen chanting 2 into 1. In Act 1, Luke can find them as he stumbles along the game board paths. They will ask Luke to bring them pairs of cards and they will conjoin them. The resulting card will have the summation of their individual attack and defense powers, as well as their abilities, while still retaining the low cost of a single card. In Act 2, the Mycologists will ask Luke for specific sets of duplicates. If Luke obliges the Mycologists enough times, they'll provide him a holokey as a reward. In Act 3, Luke can use his holokey to find a hidden route that even P03 was unaware of. Here, the Mycologists hack into P03 and take control of the bot. They want to perform the ultimate experiment, which involves combining cards during a battle. If Luke succumbs to their Frankensteinian creations, they'll insist on his return to complete the experiment. When Luke defeats them in battle, they'll combine a gem detonator, an alarm bot, and a douse card to create a piece of old data. This card is meaningless to Luke at the time, but it contains a cipher for the Carnoffel code. Excitedly, the Mycologists leave Luke, vowing to study this new discovery. There is one minor character I wanted to give special attention to: Goobert. Goobert is the pupil Magnificus turned into, well, goo. He is first encountered in Act 1, where he can be chosen as a backpack item and later spoken to about the game's events. When Luke wears Magnificus's eye, a keep-sealed caution appears, written in the wizard's magic ink. Nevertheless, Goobert is innocuous and utterly devoted to his master. In Act 2, Goobert is the first of Magnificus's pupils encountered and battled against. In Act 3, he appears in a tube in one of the back rooms. Again, he'll be very talkative and friendly with Luke. Next to Goobert is a sealed container. If Luke works out the combination to the container, he can enter Goobert's lair. In this lair, Luke finds a picture Goobert painted, a loving tribute to the friendship between himself and Magnificus. Made even sweeter knowing Goobert probably chose this medium to exhibit his affections because Magnificus is an artist. Goobert tried really hard to please him. With prompting, he'll agree to show his masterpiece to Magnificus, but we'll have to wait for the finale to see how it is received by the Scribe of Magics. Back to Bottopia. Once Luke has beaten the 4 Uberbots and possibly met the Bone Lord and Mycologists, it is finally time for the Great Transcendence. And now, P03 reveals its diabolical plan to Luke. 1. Finish the game, which Luke did during the Painter battle. 2. Gain access to Luke's hard drive to be able to make changes. This was completed through the Archivist's battle. 3. Gain access to the internet, which was done during Golly's battle, so that P03 could upload the game. And 4. Provide screenshots for the store page, which was completed during the photographer's battle. P03 boasts that Luke must have been stupid not to have realised what its goal was all this time, a pawn for a robot. And now, it is time. P03 begins the upload of the game to the internet as Luke helplessly watches on. From the shadows, Leshy sneaks up behind P03 and rips the head off the bot, fulfilling the promise he made earlier in the act. Rather unceremoniously, P03's reign is over. As Leshy tries to hand Luke the new game card to reset the world, Grimora quickly gains control of the system and chooses to delete the game entirely. The Scribe of the Dead has long sought this release. When Leshy and Magnificus react in horror, she responds that this is for the best, and hints at a great darkness within the game that must be stopped, the unspeakable Carnoffel Code. Grimora understood better than any of the other scribes the dangers of the old data, yet she herself was naive. She thought it could be destroyed. During the events of Act 3, Luke continued to make videos from the real world. After receiving an icy response from Game Funa about the existence of Inscryption, he is visited by a woman claiming to represent Game Funa. Luke records the interaction, but the old data interferes with the film. Missing from the film is a woman's name, which is replaced by binary. Converting these to text, we get the name Amanda, so we're going to assume that that's her true name. Amanda inquires whether Luke is a man who had reached out to the company. Luke is concerned about her intentions, and he lies to her about the game, feigning ignorance. When she presses him, citing knowledge of his YouTube channel, Luke deflects, asking Amanda how she managed to get past his locked gate. This causes her to back off and leave his property. Later that night, Luke decides to call up Mrs. Hobbs, the woman he purchased the inscription cards from. He asks about the cards' origins and finds that they belonged to her daughter, Casey. He learns that she was a Game Funa employee who died. The video cuts out without Luke shutting it off. The video starts again without Luke's input. It shows Luke reading an article on the fire that burned the Game Funa building. He learns that Casey Hobbs is listed as dying from fire-related complications. Luke is becoming increasingly concerned about what is uncovered, but quickly realizes that the camera has switched itself on. Once again, the video starts by itself. We see Luke Carter researching the Carnoffel Code. He's on a Wikipedia page for the card game Carnoffel. He also has hints about the ciphers needed to crack the in-game Carnoffel Code on his screen. When Luke realizes he's being recorded, he shuts off the camera. Luke also records another pack opening video for his YouTube page. He tries to retain his cheery disposition, but gives up less than half a minute in, all consumed by the world of Inscryption and its secrets. He's become utterly desperate for answers. Returning to the game world of Inscryption. The game data is being erased. It is only a matter of time before the sentient world of Inscryption is gone forever. Luke has one final chance to speak to the remaining 3 scribes in all their 3-dimensional glory. He starts in Grimora's tombs. Grimora greets Luke warmly. She invites him for a game and tells him that her motives for deleting the game weren't entirely selfish. She was trying to protect the world from the evil that lurks deep under the game. In Act 2, the woodcarver had claimed the scribes did not care for human life, but Grimora's behaviour appears to contradict this. She did care about stopping the evil. Grimora uses the opportunity to show Luke the magnificent boss fight she would have provided him, the friendly rivalry they could have had. But, just as the fanfare begins, her assets are deleted, and no battle will be had. Grimora extends her arm to shake hands with Luke before she is ushered into her final resting place. Luke is now taken back to the beginning, sitting in a log cabin across from Leshy. The two play, and Leshy compliments Luke's deck and ability. As the scale is deleted, Leshy requests that they continue. There is no need to keep score. Eventually, they lose the ability to even take turns as the bell is deleted. Leshy recognizes that it is time to say goodbye to his friend. Luke is now transported to a world devoid of detail. Only a few crumbling pieces of architecture remain. It is here he greets Magnificus for one final time. On the way to greeting Magnificus, Luke can stumble upon the painting Goobert gave to Magnificus, which is on display. The one thing Magnificus has left, and he's chosen to display it. Seems like he does care after all. Oh wait, no. Goobert's face has been painted over. Poor Goobert. Magnificus has kept his own face in the painting after erasing the artist's. Typical narcissist. As Luke approaches, the Scribe of Magics questions him on his decision not to eject the disc. He is upset and scared. He blames Luke for dooming his world. Magnificus, not wanting to die, drags out the battle until the very end, refusing to leave with grace. He sets the player's health points to 400, even though the creatures in the battle do between 0 and 1 damage per turn. The battle becomes more and more absurd as vital components are removed from the game, yet Magnificus refuses to accept the end. He himself begins to glitch as he desperately fights his removal. Finally, he has no choice but to recognize that it is truly over, and he desperately crawls toward Luke, hoping to shake his hand before he is erased. But it is too late. He had squandered his time, and now he is gone. Luke is left in an empty world. As he passes through it, he comes across the woodcarver, the last resident of this dead world. She implores Luke to leave the old Data alone, but believes he will not listen. And then she's gone too. All that is left is the old Data, which Luke accesses. The old Data does not reveal much to the player. A picture of a rural area is displayed, just titled Location. Photos of Casey Hobbs and Barry Wilkinson's ID are now displayed on the screen. The game fades away. In the real world, Luke is awoken at night by someone entering his house. He worries that he is going to be murdered and uses his video camera to record evidence. As he opens his bedroom door to confront his intruder, the recording suddenly cuts. When the recording begins again, it is mostly static, but for a brief moment it reveals a post-it note, perhaps left by the intruder. The note contains a key to a cipher for the ARG and must be combined with the monstrosity the Mycologists created in Act 3. This footage would indicate that Luke had started to grasp the old Data and the Carnoffel code. There is another video file in the same directory that contains Luke sitting in front of his green screen, playing with dice on scales and laughing maniacally. He seems to be truly losing it. We find another piece of footage that Luke never intended to be captured. Luke trying to destroy the floppy disk containing the old Data, The camera screen glitches, reacting with each hit of the hammer, another demonstration of how the old data affects and is affected by the real world. We are left with one final clip of Luke. He is calling a reporter to discuss the problematic nature of the game. He mentions that the game took control of his PC and that an employee from Game Funa had come to his house to pressure him. As Luke begins to delve into the details of the game, the clip cuts, hiding anything Luke revealed to the journalist. As he talks to the Herald, he is interrupted by Amanda knocking on the door. He opens the door to confront her, and he is immediately shot by her. Unperturbed, she walks over his dying body and heads toward his computer. This marks the end of the game. But on October 19, Luke's camera turns itself on one final time and captures his PC monitor. Now, this footage can only be found if you played the ARG and followed the clues, or if you were like me, nicked the URL from somebody who had. The footage shows something is accessing the command prompt in System 32. We can see that Inscryption store page has been configured, its screenshots have been uploaded, and the program itself was in the process of being uploaded, before being interrupted. This is all in line with the events of Act 3, where P03's head was ripped off before the upload could complete. But now, seemingly of its own accord, the upload resumes and completes. The game is now available on a Steam page to be downloaded by unsuspecting players all around the world. P03's dream has been realised. We are left with a final image of a stoat, P03, who winks at us. Well, that's it for my Inscryption lore video. I do hope you enjoyed. I'll leave some links in the description below, including one to the unlisted final ending video, as well as to Luke Carter's Lucky Carter YouTube channel, which has some very interesting footage that wasn't really worth talking about in this video, but still might be of interest to you anyway. Once again, thank you for making it to the end of my longest video to date. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.